Some South Vietnamese officers and government officials grew rich by selling stolen gasoline and other supplies. Pilots sometimes demanded bribes to evacuate wounded soldiers.
When the military budget was so drastically reduced, the so-called one-time use bandages and syringes for the use of medical drugs and blood bags and that sort of thing for transfusions, those were gone. They had to wash the bandages. I don't know what they did for blood bags. Their medical support, which had been pretty good, was getting very, very grim.
More than 31,000 South Vietnamese soldiers died in 1974, their highest number for any year except 1972.
The Americans instilled in the Vietnamese soldiers and officers the American way to fight a war. Then, when the Americans withdrew and the supplies reduced, it was only natural that the morale and the combat effectiveness of the troops had to change for the worse.
The Americans had spent lavishly in Vietnam. At Cam Ranh Bay, they built a $2 billion deepwater port. Now, homeless Vietnamese improvised shelters out of its deserted barracks and clubs. Aid had been cut and the bombing stopped, but Thieu still counted on pledges from 2 U.S. presidents and from Ambassador Martin. Like many Vietnamese, he could not believe the U.S. would abandon its enormous investment in Vietnam. In Hanoi in October 1974, North Vietnamese leaders reached a different conclusion. General Van Tien Dung, a senior strategist, was present.
During this meeting, we reached an important conclusion. The American imperialists had already withdrawn their troops from the southern part of Vietnam, and it would be very difficult for them to return. Therefore, no matter how much aid they gave the Saigon regime, they could not prevent the collapse of that regime.
After 30 years of almost continuous war, the communists' dream of a reunified Vietnam seemed within reach. This North Vietnamese film depicts the beginning of the 1975 campaign, commanded by General Dung. More than 100,000 fresh troops moved down the Ho Chi Minh Trail, now a modern truck route. They massed in communist-held areas in the south. Crack units attacked the province of Phuoc Long and easily took its capital city. They were probing, testing America's reaction. Thieu renewed his appeal for U.S. aid.
What we need is have enough means, not only to sustain the current situation, but as long as the communists sustain the momentum of their offensive, I think we still need the means to defend ourselves.
Backing Thieu, President Ford and Ambassador Martin affirmed that America had a moral responsibility to South Vietnam.
The Ford administration was then trying to get Congress to vote more money for Vietnam and Cambodia, and a number of us went to Vietnam and Cambodia in late February and early March to try to appraise the situation, to test against what Martin had been saying, what the reality was. But Graham Martin, the ambassador, and his station chief were incapable of giving a fair appraisal to a visiting team of congressmen. They were so emotionally wrapped up in the desire to save South Vietnam. Martin was saying the Vietnamese can stand, all you got to do is give them more ammunition and more equipment.
The delegation concluded that South Vietnam had received enough American aid. It would now have to fight alone. At the same time, General Dung deployed 3 divisions, encircling the city of Ban Ma Thuột in South Vietnam's Central Highlands. He was confident that the Americans would not intervene, but he still expected that it would take 2 years to defeat Thieuy's forces. He moved carefully.
In order to allow the tanks to go in, the artillery units shelled steadily for about 2 days, so that the enemy would not be able to hear the rumbling noise of the tanks.
Dung also staged several diversionary attacks around Pleiku, another highland city. The South Vietnamese were lured into defending Pleiku, weakening Ban Ma Thuot's defenses. As they left, Dung's troops moved.
Our unit reached the outskirts of Ban Ma Thuột at 4 o'clock in the afternoon of March 9, 1975. We made camp, rested, ate, and prepared for the next day's attack against the city. We were ordered to fight the enemy at close range, to cling to their belts, as we put it.
Within 2 days, Dung's superior forces had overwhelmed Ban Ma Thuột.
My own Air Force unit transported 2 regiments of special forces to Pleiku in order to retake Ban Ma Thuột. But to our complete surprise, on the 14th, there was an order to withdraw from Pleiku. Nobody could believe it.
President Thieu made a crucial decision. He ordered his forces to abandon the northern and central provinces and form a new line of defense further south. But hoping to avoid panic, he did not announce the withdrawal or reveal his plans. As the rumors flew, fear spread. Nobody knew what to believe, and nobody wanted to be left behind.
During the withdrawal, the Air Force obviously was using their airplanes to get out any way they could. Mixed in with all of this, as if it wasn't complicated enough, was the panic-stricken flight of tens of thousands of civilians and dependents. In many instances, the military forces up there had their own families living with them in Kon Tum Pleiku area. That meant that they had to be extremely concerned about the protection and survival of their own family. At a time when they were attempting to retreat whatever of their forces were remaining back to the coast.
Ban Ma Thuột fell, but the government said nothing. We only learned about the withdrawal from Pleiku from rumors. The administration issued no official announcements at all. Because of that silence, people stopped believing in the government.
The official silence panicked the population. Within days, thousands of civilians were streaming toward the coastal city of Da Nang, desperately seeking safety.